live. Okay, so all right, so I guess we'll just get started. Charlotte might come later. She might be running late, but welcome to this little color theory class. It's a class that I came up with because I noticed that color mixing is a big challenge for a lot of artists, no matter what level they are. If they've never had a color theory class or have had the experience of the how and why of mixing color and why knowledge of pigments versus the theory matters, this could be extremely helpful for you as well. So to start, let's just, I guess, go around the room because some of us might not know each other. And I gave you a little form to fill out. Some of you have seen it before. You don't need to fill it out if I already have it, on file. Let me just, I'm gonna start a couple of other things on my computer here so that we can do our little introductions. Most of you know me. I'm Kim Cesaretti, and I teach some classes here. I'm a certified art teacher. I'm a graphics artist. I taught web design graphics at Georgian Court for a while. I worked for the Navy for 16 years, but after that, I had stopped working there when I had my two daughters. And when they got older, I still continued as an adjunct teaching the web design graphics course. When they were in preschool, I stopped doing that. And when they got older, I decided that I wanted to go back to my first love, which was painting and drawing and fine art. So that's what I did. And that led to the opportunity to teach and use my education background. So I was really thrilled to be able to start doing that. And, here I am today, enjoying every minute of sharing what I know with all of you. And I have a special place in my heart for beginners. So, they're my favorite students to have because they have fresh eyes. And here I'm at the front of the studio. Everybody would want to wave, and I just you're live. So if you wouldn't mind, just sharing your first name, what your previous art experience is, and what you hope to accomplish in this class or for your art. Actually, what are your dreams for your art? I think we all have dreams, right? So let's go.
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
So I'm Susan.
Susan.
And I love to paint. I paint my studio. I do like to paint outside.
Great.
And mixing colors has always been a challenge for me. So I think if I could learn some really good greens and blues, it would be.
Yes, blues and greens. Yeah, they're a challenge. Mixing greens, and this is the perfect class to learning about how to mix the perfect green or the green that you need or that's appropriate for the particular scene that you're working on, whether it's a still life with flowers or being outdoors in a forest
We all need greens. Even, in the ocean, there's greens. There's green everywhere. And it's one of the most difficult colors, I think, to learn how to mix. And one of the reasons why is because of having the understanding of pigments in the paint and knowing which way your paints lean, whether they're yellow or blue, and that learning that will, and also you'll be creating some of your own tools here, which I don't have the blanks for the color charts, but we're going to be taking a look at that and adding to your toolbox so that you will be able to have a chart to refer to or a tool to refer to look at to get you in the ballpark. So for example, this right here is an example of an acrylic chart, and actually there's some repetition here. It's actually a mirror. So we're going to be focusing on one part of the triangle, but you see here all the different greens that you can get, and amazingly there are some unexpected combinations of colors that yield green too, that we're going to have a little bit of experience too. So we're all in a good place there. Okay, who would like to be next?
I will.
Okay, Kim.
My name's Kim. My son and I started painting. I retired, and then when the pandemic began, my son and I were walking around town. And last year, I actually took an online color theory class.
Oh, cool.
So I really understand what you mean, Kim, about the pigments and the numbers. But doing an online class is really not great because you're really not practicing. So I think that this course is going to be really great. And I love coloring boxes. You could see.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Woo, look at this. Yes. Boxes.
Those are my blues those are straight blues from the watercolors that I have.
Cool.
So I've done that with all my colors, but now it's time to learn how to mix them and do some fun things with that.
Awesome. Yeah. So great. So you already have an introduction. So that's great. So that's great. That gives you a leg up, even if it was online and maybe there wasn't as much practical application of it. But it's a great way to learn. There's tons of videos that you can find online on color mixing, and I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from books, and I have to say I was first introduced to color theory in college. But it wasn't a whole class about color theory. It was like color and design. And we did get into the theory, and there was some practical application of it. But what was lacking from it was the understanding of the pigments and the way they lean. That whole part of it was never explained to me early on, and I feel like if it was, then I think I would have had a lot more fun exploring color more, knowing that, because it really does enrich your understanding, and it's so helpful when you understand pigments and the spectrum that gets reflected off of certain pigments, and we'll get into that more within the next few minutes of our introduction here. So now we have Suzanne.
Hi, my name is Suzanne. Even though I've been painting most of my life, I really didn't know anything about color or color theory beyond the basic traditional color wheel.
Yeah.
And greens have been my nemesis. So I keep buying tubes of green paint and never hitting on exactly what I want. So
yeah. One thing I will say for me is that I always prefer to mix my greens, because I have never really found a green straight out of a tube that really looks like anything from nature or really captures the beauty of the greens that we see in nature. And it's not always all about what we see in nature. I mean, sometimes those greens that come out of those tubes, I mean, they're great, the way they are, if you want to be, more abstract or more designy. But if you're a representational artist, the green straight out of the tube, 9 times out of 10, you can't use them straight out of the tube in order to create a green that's realistic looking. Most often, you can use them, but most often, you're gonna have to mix it with another color. And, there's all different types of greens. So, go on, I didn't mean to
Oh, no,
expand on that, but,
that's basically it, but that's what I've been finding, that you can't use the green right out of the tube. I always have to mix something else
Yeah.
into it, because I never quite hit the right mix
yeah,
of what I'm looking for, so.
yeah, well,
Now, and I've been noticing on here that the yellow ochre has been used to mix a lot, which I've never really used that to mix a color,
yeah.
and I don't know why. I would always go to a cadmium yellow, but I would forget
Yeah.
about the yellow ochre that I see gives some nice shades.
Yeah, yellow ochre is a nice earthy pigment. It's a duller, darker yellow in value. Yeah, it's a beautiful color. It is. It is also, compared to the other yellows, it's also more opaque. So that's another thing we're going to talk about too. It's not just about the color, but it's also about some colors are more transparent than others, some pigments. So that's a factor in how successful we are at mixing. Light fastness is another issue. There are a lot of colors out there that are like fugitive colors, like some of the pinks that you get out of a tube. Some of the pinks and the reds are fugitive colors, so you have to be careful about purchasing them. And we're going to learn, how to judge, how to evaluate the different grades of pigments.
When you say fugitive colors, basically,
It means that they fade over time, like they become ghost colors, like they disappear. And actually, there are actual works of art that in museums that do not appear the way the artist originally intended because of fugitive pigments that they had used. And over, a couple hundred years, it's faded, and what you see is not the color that they painted. I mean, still, considered a masterpiece, still in the museum, and still looks beautiful. However, but back then, who knew? We don't have all the knowledge that we have today about all the different, pigments, which is great. And there's so much, there's a wealth of information online, which I can point out to. Hi.
Hi, my name is Kathy, and I've taken a number of courses with you.
Okay.
I was, in the last, I think, 2 painting courses I took with you, I was fascinated by the fact that you can do a whole painting on a limited palette. You
Yeah.
don't need all, to go out and buy certain colors, because you can mix them yourself. So that was
Exactly.
really, I enjoyed that part of it. So yeah, so I want to learn more about mixing colors.
Great.
I guess I'd like to paint more and be more confident in my paintings. I have a tendency to analyze. I'll just stare at what I paint, and I'll say, well, maybe, I could do this or that, or and time goes by, and I don't do anything. I become immobilized. So
Yeah. Well, sometimes, being in a class helps with that too, and being with other people, even if it's an open session, I think, because we have a tendency to, other things, get distracted by other things in our houses. And that is exactly how I was able to get back into my fine art with small children, was that I had to leave the house. That's why I took the class with Pauline. I was like, I have to get out of here, or I am never going to pick this up again, because there's always something. There's always an interruption. You're staring at the Mount Washmore. I call it the pile of laundry is Mount Washmore, right? The dirty dishes, everything that's piling up. But just anything. Anything can be a distraction, and it's sometimes very motivating to be with other people. It's nice to be with other people who have that common interest, I think, too. It's totally helpful. I totally get it. Yeah. And, I sometimes I say, if it weren't for teaching, I might not pick up the brush, This is actually gets me painting and puts me on a continuum. Now, since since I've kind of like found my own niche and my own groove, like I kind of know now, I have a direction that I know I want to go in, and now I have that, motivation. Okay, that's something that I have to do on my own, which is, as an artist, you should do. It shouldn't be just what you're doing in a class. Even if you're a teacher, you have to go beyond. You have to push yourself and push the envelope, right? But these things that I'm teaching you, like color theory and all the other, types of paintings that I do teach, it does help you get started, and it gives you, the technique and the skills that you need so that you can feel confident to do that. Because that's what it's really about for me. Well, for me as a teacher, is it's not enough for you. For me, it's not enough to see you just complete a painting in a class. What I want to see you do is I want to give you the knowledge so that on your own, you can feel confident to do this on your own and to bring your work to a new level. Be more creative and more expressive and put yourself into your work. That's like the ultimate goal. It's not like a class is never the end all be all, no matter who's teaching it. I mean, you take workshops here and there, taking a class with me, taking a class with another instructor. You glean from that what works for you and incorporate that into your own practice. But to stay where that instructor is not, should never be your goal. Should never be your goal. So thanks for sharing all of that, and we'll get back to business. And I'm going to turn this.
We're going to turn our attention to my little color theory presentation. And this is pretty much an overview of what we're going to start with and learn. So I'm going to present that. Let's see if this will let me dismiss that. It's not letting me. Oh, there it did. It's just on a little bit of a delay. Okay. Here we go. Oh. No, I didn't want to do the full screen. I need to do controls. Sorry. I thought that it was going to present for me. What happened here? Okay. All right, here we go. Let's just make sure that that's up and running in full screen before I take a look, because sometimes the presentation's a little unpredictable. Okay. Make sure it goes like maybe it will, maybe it won't. Oh. Sorry. Okay. All right, so this is color theory. And this is the first part. And what I gave you, what I handed out, was a picture of the traditional color wheel. Okay, this is a picture of what you would see, in the ideal world. Okay, if there were pure primary colors, if there was a pure yellow, a pure red, and a pure blue, and then we mix them together, this is what a color wheel would look like. And this is what we're accustomed to, okay? We buy the color wheel in the store, it's calibrated to the ideal situation, and we think, oh, okay, this is bring that next time. Anyway, okay, so this is the real world. You have the primaries, and then you have the tertiaries, which are, we'll explain this again, you know, your orange, your green, and your violet. And then you have primary, secondary, that was secondary, and then the tertiaries, which is a mix of a secondary color with a primary color. And we'll go through all of that. Okay, again, the traditional color wheel, primary, secondary, tertiary. I didn't give you a rundown. I'm going to send you a link to this presentation so that you have it. But for now, this is good enough to know. So here's a representation of all the colors. Again, the ideal world. Primary, secondary, tertiary. And then we have color schemes. And this is a fun section where I take each of these color schemes, and then on the next page, we're going to see examples from art history, famous artworks that show are examples of these different color schemes. So we have the primary color scheme, which is red, yellow, and blue, secondary, orange, green, and purple, complementary, or sometimes we call it a contrasting color scheme. It's any two colors directly opposite each other on the wheel. So here they show it's blue, green, and red, orange. Red and green are opposites. Blue and orange are opposites. Violet and yellow are opposites. Whatever colors are opposite one another on the color wheel are your complements or your contrasting color scheme. So on the next page, I have 3 works from art history that are great examples of each of those different color schemes. Primary, Mondrian, with the addition, of course, of the black and white. He's known for the color blocks, doing color block images. And then this one, we see the red, yellow, and blue. And then in these irises by Van Gogh, we see the orange, the violet, and the green. And those are your secondary color schemes. And then this beautiful sunrise by Monet, we see the blue and the orange, that complementary color scheme in that. And you can see, you know, the beauty in each of these, even though they're different styles by different artists, the beauty of having, these are examples of limited palettes right there. Right there, a primary, a secondary, and a complementary color scheme. Those are examples of limited palettes. And then next we have these color schemes. We have analogous, warm versus cool, and triad. Now analogous is any 3 to 5 adjacent colors or colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. That is, and it doesn't matter where on the wheel you are, pick any 3 to 5, and that will serve as an analogous color scheme. Next, we have warm versus cool. Okay, so we talk about temperature with color. And this here gives you an indication of how do we divide the color wheel into warm versus cool. Our warm colors are generally the reds, orange, and yellows. And our cool colors are our greens, blues, and violets. Now later, we're going to talk about how with our color palette that, you know, even though you have a warm color, you could have a cooler version of it. Even though you have a cool blue, you can have a warmer version of it. So within these colors, the primary colors have warm and cool versions of each primary. So we'll get into that a little bit later. This just speaks to the color wheel as a whole. And then we have what's called a triad. Actually, a primary color scheme is an example of a triad. Any 3 colors that are equidistant on the color wheel. So here, okay, so red, yellow, and blue, the primary color scheme, that's considered a triad. We have red, orange, yellow, green, and blue, violet as a triad example here. But it doesn't matter. You can take this triangle and spin it around and come up with all different types of examples of triad color schemes. On the next page, we're going to see what they are in with examples from art history. We have Van Gogh's irises here as an analogous color scheme. I picked two different works to show you an example of a warm versus a cool. We have this red canna from Georgia O'Keeffe, which is totally warm. And then we have this totally cool piece from Picasso's blue period called The Old Guitarist. You can see all those beautiful blues. And I have this Andy Warhol Shot Blue Marilyn here, which is a triad because it's mainly primary colors here. We have reds, yellows, and blues in this. So that makes a nice triad. So we still have more color schemes. We have what's called a split complement, a double split complement, and we have monochromatic. Now, with a double split complement, you're starting with, okay, so you have the two opposites on the color wheel, okay, except with this particular color scheme, you have both harmony and contrast. You have one key color plus the colors, and in this case, it's the yellow, plus the colors on either side of its complementary opposite color. So the opposite of yellow is violet. But with a split complementary, instead of picking the violet that's opposite the yellow, we pick the two tertiary colors that are beside the violet. We have the red violet and the blue violet, and we have those three in our split complementary, which is. Oh yeah. Yeah, I love playing around with different color combinations. I'll sit there and I'll pick what I do for fun sometimes is I'll just say, okay, what colors am I feeling like today? And sometimes I'll take that, I'll mix them up, and I'll just do like some kind of a free painting, just using the colors that I mix, just to play around with them. That is such a fun thing to do that I encourage you guys to do when you're playing around with color theory, is to take that paint that you use to make those blocks and just do painting, see what you can make out of it, because it's really can be really beautiful. Now in the double split complementary, we're taking the complements, but in this case, instead of using one key color, it's split complement on both. It's using the split on both sides of each of the complementary color. So for the yellow, we're using yellow orange and yellow green, plus the red violet and the blue violet. And then finally, we have the monochromatic color. In this monochromatic example, they're showing you tints of colors, like a monochromatic like pink, a monochromatic blue, and like a monochromatic orange. Those are three different. It's a single color in a range of hues, and it could be tints, tones, or shades. So tints are made by mixing white, like showing here. You can create a monochromatic color palette and you swap out the black for the white and create shades. Or what's kind of fun too is you can, well, I guess you wouldn't do that in this case. But what I like to do is create a range with the complementary color. Like, so maybe I'll swap out white for like, in this case, for like a green, and play around and see what I get there. Because that desaturates color. That's a whole other issue. We'll talk about saturation and desaturation. But just know that whenever you mix one color with another color, a different color, you're automatically desaturating it. But the most desaturated color, or the dulling, we're talking about dulling it, graying it out, or browning out, is accomplished by picking the complementary color. So you'll dull a yellow, the most you can dull it chromatically, by adding a violet. And you'll get some form of brown or gray. No matter whatever you pick, two colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel, you will get mud. And there are times when you need mud in a painting. But start with, if you're going to mix, instead of resorting to mixing your color with a gray out of a tube, mix a complement in to gray it out instead, and then you'll create a chromatic gray that's harmonious with all the other colors in your painting. And that will result in a more beautiful work. So now we're going to see some examples of work that show each of these: split complement, double split, and monochromatic. I chose this one, the Milkmaid by Vermeer, to show the split complement here. That was pretty cool. And then we have the double split complementary with the Monet, and then the monochromatic with the Nude Descending a Staircase with Marcel Duchamp. So all, pretty, that's from the Cubist period. This is 15th century Flemish, and this is, of course, from the Impressionist period. So artists throughout time have capitalized on their knowledge of color and color theory to make the strongest work that they could make. So what are the benefits of learning about color schemes? Well, these are some of my own reasons that I've come up with, in light of my experience with color. And I think it inspires us to try new and different color combinations that we might never have thought about before, or maybe we're too afraid to try, So you would think, I don't want to mix those colors together. I don't think that they'll look good together, including these three colors on here. But really, the color wheel and knowing about color theory, it can give us the confidence to try and to play around. It also can help us to create the emotion, energy, or mood we would like our painting to convey. Color says a lot about mood. Value does too, but color enhances a mood and can communicate a mood. And knowing how to use color that way can help us. It also inspires us to choose a limited palette that will help us to achieve color harmony in our compositions. And what I had shared to you about, mixing the chromatic browns and grays from using the complements that you might have already used in your painting, that's an example of how to use a limited color palette to create color harmony and also variety. But overall, what we're going for is a harmonious feeling in our painting, and that's how we would achieve that. And to learn about more historical works that effectively use color schemes, I have a link here. And the second part is how to put our color theory into practice. Okay, all right, so we started out with the color wheel, the traditional color wheel. Now I want you to pull out the color bias. Color bias wheel. Now you'll notice in this wheel that the primary colors are left out, because in reality, the reality of pigments is that there are no pure primaries in the world of pigments. And that's why they're left blank. And what we say is pigments lean. They lean one way or the other. Our reds lean either red or violet. Our blues lean either violet or green, and our yellows lean either green or orange. That's the reality of our pigments. And in a little while, I'm going to arrange these tubes of paint according to the color wheel, and I'll show you that on the overhead in a sec. This is another color. Oh, you know what? I should go back. I want to go back to this because I want to explain. This color wheel came from a book that I had read. I guess it's more than a few years ago now. It's called Blue and Yellow Don't Make Green. And it's by Michael Wilcox. And it was the first, I believe, I had read some other books that referenced this book as a source of great information about pigments and color theory and color mixing. And it's a bit of a technical book, but that is the source for this color wheel. And that's what really opened my eyes and got me excited about color and pigments. And oh my gosh, this takes out so much more of the guesswork. It gave me so much more confidence when, I had researched the subject and discovered all these things about pigments that I didn't know before. And in this book, it explains to you, you know, on the website, there's actually a website, I think, that he has where he actually tests all these different paints, right? He tests them for light fastness. But the book itself explains to you how different pigments, what colors on the spectrum are reflected back to the human eye. And it really does help with your understanding of the pigments. So I'm going to give you the watered down version of it, like in layman's terms, and applying it, because it is a bit overwhelming. So I encourage you to maybe get the book, read it, see what you think about it. But it might be pretty on the technical side. What I like to do is I like to take the information that I research and try to, break it down, and okay, well, how can a student take this information, and how can I present it to them in a way that makes sense, where they can quickly understand it, and also quickly put that knowledge into practice to help them mix the colors. So that's what we'll be focusing on. I found this one recently. This is pretty involved, but in this color wheel, this particular person, Bruce McAvoy, and you can find more about him. There's a weird kind of website. It's called handprint.com, and that's where you can access this chart for yourself and blow it up if you need to. But he arranges the paint pigments according to a color wheel. So you can see, like, there's a loose representation of a color wheel, but you see how the colors are all in all different places is because these pigments, they reflect, they don't reflect pure primaries. They reflect other colors. They reflect greens. And that's what this does. This particular pigment color wheel does. It organizes it in that fashion. So what you'll see too is some of the colors that you buy in a tube. All right, let's move on to this. All right, so here's a couple examples I gave you an example of a color chart that I used. And this one happens to be oils. It doesn't matter what medium you're using. It's still the same process. You use the paints that you have in your box. And this is a basic two-color color chart. Two-color color chart. Use the paints you have in your box. Mix each of the colors with each other. And then the two-color mixing chart, that'll serve as a great place to start to help you identify colors for your painting that are in the general ballpark of what you need. So this creates a ballpark. Like, I think I need a green that's close to this. And then you look and you see what two colors you mixed that help you get there. Okay, so this would be a starting point. You might have to mix a third color, but at least if you know what the two major colors to start with, that puts you so much farther ahead, and it eliminates the guesswork and wasting all of that paint trying to find that color, because that's a huge issue too, is waste all this paint trying to mix the perfect color. At least if you have this tool, you can at least get in the ballpark. So that's how I created that. And you'll see this part, you're going to get a copy of this to work with, and it has one grayed out, because as you can see, this is a mirror. So in order to save you some time doing double the work, I truncated that for you. All right. And this is an example of one that was done with acrylic paint. Okay. All right, so Richard Schmid, he wrote Alla Prima 2. He actually passed away a few months ago. Great painter. I actually have his book. And here's what he said. This is what a master artist knows about color. He absolutely was a master. I know, and this book is actually considered like a Bible, I would say, for painters. It's one of the Bibles that they refer to. I know this simple fact. When painting from life, all I have to do is correctly identify a color I see in my subject as a specific pigment or mixture of pigments, and then put it on my canvas in the right place. Nothing more. See it right, mix what I see right, and then stick it where it belongs. You know, and that was Richard Schmid. I always call it the Schmid book. It's a la prima too. And yes, it does seem so simple, right? I mean, but you can train your eye. Over time, you'll be able to train your eye. Like I'm to the point now where if I look at a particular scene, I'm looking out the window now and I'm looking at this holly tree and I'm thinking to myself, what two colors would I use to mix that? And I'll be thinking about that because I've had this experience many times of having mixed those pigments and having that understanding, and it really has helped me look at the natural world, whether it's a still life or whether I'm outdoors, and I can start thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to use cobalt blue with maybe a little burnt sienna, or maybe a little alizarin crimson, or that light. To me, that's under her chin looks like a little bit of cad red light. Like you'll be able, eventually, with practice, you will be able to see that, make those connections. But those are connections that you might not have made before. So it takes time to create those connections. So just know that at first it might be challenging, but with time and experience, it can become second nature to you. And you'll be able to think this statement in your head and say, yeah, he's right. And not even give it a second thought. Like now it seems daunting, it seems overwhelming, right? But I also want you to remember though that it's okay to paint the colors you feel instead. It's as artists, it's not always about what we see and what we observe. It's also about how a particular place or an object makes us feel, and we also have the freedom to use color to be more expressive. So while the focus here might be on observable color, just know that this is not the end all be all, and this is not where your use of color should end, or your approach to color is not limited to this. It can, you are free to go beyond that, as we have seen in some of those artworks from history that I showed, like the irises. Like those, he painted those colors that he saw. It just happened to work color theory wise by using the violet, the orange, and the green together. He put that together. Was that exactly what he saw? Probably not. But that's what makes it so beautiful, is that he turned up the colors that he saw. He over exaggerated certain things in order to express what he felt about those flowers. Okay, so just know that. Physical properties: transparent versus opaque. Alizarin crimson is a very transparent color, whereas like yellow ochre, well, this one, it's called yellow oxide because in this series it was too hard to find yellow ochre. But anyway, yellow ochre is generally opaque. Titanium white is like the most opaque that you can use. One pure pigment versus combos. Look at the P number. Is there more than one? Okay. Sometimes some of those really cool colors that you see in a tube most often have more than one P number. So while you might be inclined to purchase those colors, if it has more than one P number, chances are it's a color that you can mix from colors that you might already have that are one P number. So let's see, a color like alizarin crimson. Let's see, does this give me more than one? Do they list P numbers? Okay, alizarin crimson has more than one P number. It's PR206 plus PR202, and it's right on the back of the tube. If you see a color that's more than one P number, think to yourself, do I really have, if you're in the store, think, do I really have to buy this? What are these P numbers? Do I already have them in my box? I don't need to buy every every tube of color that I see, because I can mix that if it has more than one P number. So PR206, and that's now there are charts that help us. Well, all right. So a color that I love, that I actually do buy. Okay, this is another example of a color that has more than one P number. We have PB29, PB15:3, PG7, and PW6. So PB is, that's a blue. PB29, which I do think PB29 is ultramarine blue. I already have that. PB29 is one P number, right? PB15:3, I'm not sure what that is. Oh my God, look at that text. Anyway, just know that this has really one. W6, um, I think you could find, I think I've come across that online. What I will say though is, like if you go to Blick website, if you click on any paint color, no matter what especially Winsor and Newton, any of their products, uh, they do a really good job of explaining the pigments and the pigments that are in the paints. And usually in the product description, they will have the pigment. There'll be like a tab for pigment information, and you can get more information from that as well. Yeah. It looks like the P numbers go across from watercolors to acrylics to oils. Yes, correct. Okay. Absolutely, yeah. So it doesn't matter if you're using acrylics, oils, watercolors, even pastels, any medium that has color pigments. The difference between the different mediums isn't necessarily the pigments, but the binder. So, like for example, linseed oil is the binder of oils. For acrylics, it's like polyvinyl acrylic, whatever the binder is for acrylics. It's like an acrylic vinyl type of binder. With with watercolors, what's the binder in watercolors? It's not oxbow, it's something else. But anyway, it's a water soluble. That's why watercolors are water soluble and acrylics aren't. Acrylics have an acrylic binder. Watercolors have a water soluble binder that will dissolve with water. And let's see. And then pastels have some other kind of binder, or some of them don't. Some of them don't have binders. The really, really soft, high quality pastels have very little binder in them and are like pure pigment. And the way that they form them is they're highly compressed. So that's a great, and they also sell pigments and powders so that you can make basically your own paints, whether it be a watercolor, you can add your own binder to it. And there are artists that do that. I'm not one of them because if I had to spend my time doing that, I would never paint off. So, so I'm not willing to go there. So, yeah. So, um, so just know that if it has more than one P number, there's a chance that unless it's a color like cerulean blue, I use a lot of cerulean blue. So that's not a color that I necessarily want to mix. But if it's some like obscure color that I'm probably only going to use once, if it has more than one P number, I'm going to look and see what the P numbers are, see if I can't mix that color for that one instance. Because then that prevents you, what it does, having that knowledge, it prevents you from buying a multitude of tubes of paint that are going to dry up before you can use them. These colors that I have right here, pretty much, and again, I'm going to put them around the wheel. We're going to look at them more closely in the overhead in a minute. For most of what I do, I only need these colors. So you only need about a dozen, maybe. You can even do it with less to start out with. But I often don't need more than that, ever. You know. So, and fortunately, my colors don't dry out before I get a chance to use them all because they're frequently used and well loved. So we have chemical pigments versus natural pigments. You know, some of them are derived from the earth. There are some pigments that are earth pigments that are made like from minerals that, you know, like earthy, burnt sienna, burnt umber maybe. The blacks probably might be more mineral, the titanium white, and then you have some more chemical that are made with more dyes. So some are, just know that some are chemically derived and some are earthen. So for that reason, for the earthen pigments, those are colors that, yeah, you can find probably a chemically derived pigment that's close to that, but some of the more beautiful colors, you might want to have them in a tube instead of, you know, a generic, because, you know, the earth pigments can be really beautiful. I mean, at one time, uh, you know, the most beautiful blue paint was made with lapis lazuli, which was a very, very, even gemstones throughout history. And that's not something, I mean, it's very expensive and they've come up with probably chemical equivalents to that. So some of them are made through some pigments are made chemically through an oxidation of metal process. There's all different types of ways that they've made pigments. That isn't necessarily our concern. But what is our concern is, okay, the different, I would say the vocabulary that we would associate with paints and pigments. Hue is general or local color. It's color references used in ordinary conversation. Okay, it's a red apple, red roses, the blue sky. That's an example. Okay, what's the hue? Relativity is when a color appears different under different circumstances. The influence of surrounding colors or the ambient light illuminating a subject. So a color might look different under different lighting conditions. Any of these paintings with interior lighting that are hanging on the wall are going to look different outdoors. If I bring a branch of that holly in here, it's going to look different under artificial light than it does in natural light. So just understand that. Sometimes you see some of those optical illusions where they'll put a color on one color background and they'll put the same color on a different color background, and you have this perception that the one color is different than the other, even though it's the same color, just because of the colors around it. That's another thing that they're talking about too. I'll have to bring an example of that in sometime. Saturation. You can desaturate a color by mixing with other colors, either a complement, black, white, any other color. So, intensity, pure pigments out of the tube. Like this blue it's bluest in the tube. As soon as I take it out and I mix it another color, it lessens the intensity. of the color. Tinting strength, the ability of a pigment to change the hue of white or any other pigment. So what that means is some colors out of the tube are stronger than others, meaning that say I want to create a tint. If I want to tint this white, okay, a different color, it's going to take a lot more, let's say, dark sienna than it will for like cadmium red, because cadmium red has a higher tinting strength than like this earthy pigment. That's just the nature of it. The phthalo blue, phthalo green, those are other examples of colors that have real high tinting strengths, and you only need add a tiny bit of it to your white in order to change that white to a tint. So that's what it refers to. So just because we have these mixtures in the tubes, it doesn't mean that they all have the same strength in the same amount. Like if I take, in other words, if I take the same amount of the alizarin crimson, I take the same amount of this sienna, like I take the white, I'm gonna get a more intense red than I would with the black. Next one. As an example, color families, we talked about those before in our presentation with the artworks from history, primary, secondary, tertiary. Those were color families. Color harmony. Colors like to be with other colors. That's the way I would describe it. Color harmony. So color harmony is, well, there are different types of color harmony. So color harmony is when a little bit of each color is mixed in. We'll demonstrate this later, but color harmony is when, say you pick 3 colors and you create a mud pile and you add a little bit of the mud to each color, then those 3 colors, instead of being separate and different, from each other, if they have a little bit of each in each other, they will become more harmonious. In a painting, you can also create a harmonious feel by, including in each major part of the painting, or randomly throughout different, in multiple parts of the painting, including all the different colors through it. Could be in less amounts, but that's another way to achieve harmony. Color temperature, warm versus cool, we talked about that. That half, with our yellows, oranges, and reds are our warms, and our blues, greens, and purples are our cools. That's something to take into consideration. Value and tone, that's light, medium, and dark. Now, out of the tube, we see in the color wheel, some colors on the color wheel are inherently lighter in value than others. Like the yellow is very light in value, but the blues and the violets are very dark in value. Okay, but we can adjust our values by either adding a darker color to it, or by adding black, or we can create a tint, a lighter color, by mixing it with white or another lighter color. If I want a lighter red, that's not pastel. What I might do is look to mix it with an orange first to see if that lightens it to my liking, rather than adding white and creating a pastel pink. If you add white to red, it'll turn it pink. But if you want a lighter red that's slightly lighter than this, then maybe you just want to go down a couple of pick a lighter red first and lighten your red that way. See if that gets you closer. So there's little tricks like that you learn. Okay, so next is, so we're going to create our own color chart, and I have instructions for that I believe I gave you. But before we do that, I'm going to get out of this first. We'll come back to this. But I want to go back to I want to go back to, oh, what happened here? Did my camera poop out? Camera pooped out. I'm going to get this back online. There we go. All right. Okay, so I'm going to make this transition here. All right. Okay. And let me bring this back up. Back up. This. Okay. I'll arrange these colors. I'm going to arrange some. Our understanding of, okay. The color bias wheel, okay. I'm going to start with the yellows. So we have cad yellow light, which is that reflects more green. And then we have our cadmium yellow deep, which reflects more orange. So on either side of the yellow primary, I have what's called the cool yellow, and I have the warm yellow. Okay. The warm yellow is the more sunny yellow. The cooler yellow is, we call it cool because it reflects more green. Next, I have cadmium red and cadmium red light. Those would be considered red orange. The cad red light is a little bit more orange than cadmium red. The cadmium red is more warmer, does reflect more orange. For our violet red, we have, or the red violet, we have the alizarin crimson. Because the cadmium red, it's a bit cooler because it has a little bit more violet in it, so it's a deeper, more wine burgundy type of hue. Okay, so then we have our violet blues. I would say our violet blues are like more our cobalt blue and your ultramarine blue. Those are your two blues that reflect more violet, as opposed to cerulean blue, which reflects more green. So those are our pigments arranged according to the color. So then we have our extra pigments here. So technically, we have burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is really dark orange, so I'm going to put it out here. It looks brown, but we can consider it dark orange. And then we have this brown, which is like more the burnt umber. So that probably is more on this side of the wheel. We have the yellow ochre. The yellow ochre is on the warm side, but we're going to put that on the outskirts. And of course, we have our black and white. Our black and white is what we use or can use to adjust our values. So I think I have a list. I think I have it in the presentation. So that's our pigments arranged according to the color wheel. Do we have any questions so far? About what we can expect? Okay, so next would be then getting into our color mixing. Let's go back to the presentation. Hold on. here. Okay, so here I have this. This is in the presentation. How to create your own two-color mixing chart. It's the list of, I have this list of acrylic paint colors here. But again, this is transferable to other mediums that have similar pigments. Your cadmium yellow light we consider that a cool because it reflects green. Cadmium yellow is warm, so that reflects, it reflects orange. Okay, and your cadmium red light is warm because that reflects orange. Cadmium red, still reflecting more orange. Alizarin crimson is cool, considered cool because it reflects more violet. Cerulean blue is considered a cool because it reflects more green. Our cobalt blue and ultramarine blues, they're considered warm because they reflect more red or violet. We have the yellow ochre, that's warm. The burnt sienna, that's warm because burnt sienna, again, is dark orange. Now, remember we said when we mix opposite colors on the color wheel, we get browns or grays. When you mix burnt sienna with the darker value of ultramarine blue, you can get close to a black. Actually, you can get the darkest if you mix the ultramarine blue with a burnt umber. And that'll give you more of a chromatic black that way. But you'll have the experience of mixing those you'll see this when you mix your chart. I'm just giving you a little prelude to what to expect. And again, the burnt umber is considered more of a cool brown. It seems to have more blue in it than the burnt sienna. The burnt sienna is very warm. Like I said, it's more of a dark orange. Then we have the ivory black, which is considered cool. The reason why ivory black is considered cool is because it reflects a lot of blue. And you'll find that when you mix black, the ivory black, with any of the yellows, either the yellow ochre, the cadmium yellow light, or the cadmium yellow, you can actually get a beautiful muted green out of that. That you might often see in trees in the wintertime. Some of the the fir trees in the winter and the cedars, especially the ones that are around me that are around the lakes near my house. I often get that beautiful muted green color out of that. So you don't always need to mix yellow with blue in order to get green. Sometimes you can mix it with ivory black, and also now Payne's gray is another color that I don't have with me here that also has a lot of blue in it. We think of it as a gray, but it's actually more of a blue gray. And that, when you mix it with yellow ochre or any of the yellows, that also creates a beautiful green, beautiful muted green. So some things that you might not expect or have thought about before, if you get a chance to play around with that with your paints at home, there is so much to the world of green besides a blue tube and a yellow tube. There are other pigments out there that can help us get some really beautiful greens. So with that, let's take a look. What's next? Oh, okay. So this is a little chart, and I think I gave you guys a copy of it, did I not? How to create your own two-color mixing chart. So we're going to, let's see. I'll give you the rundown, and then we're going to do a little demonstration, and you're going to collect some stuff. Now, I don't know if you have stuff of your own to use. If you don't, for demonstration, we're going to be using, I have pre-printed charts, and we can use the acrylic paints that I have. But of course, the ideal is to use paints that you already have in your box with the medium that you use, because that is really going to be the most helpful to you. Because what I should also add is that pigments are not consistent from one brand to the next, or from one grade to the next, even within the same brand. Like this is like a student, what I'm using here is Liquitex Basic. It's kind of like a student grade, but it's great, for most of the purposes of my classes when I'm providing materials, because it's cost effective for one. Golden which is in this little tube here. Golden is my favorite acrylic brand, but it's a little pricey. heavy body acrylic. This is a softer body acrylic. And what I mean by that is heavy body acrylic is very, very thick, very concentrated. The softer body acrylic, and they don't even say it's soft body, I just know that it's a softer body. It doesn't have, it's made with artist quality pigments, but it just has a thinner consistency, which is great because a lot of times we mix our paint with medium and water anyway. So sometimes it's nicer to have the thinner consistency. I really like that. But just know that this paint is thinner. Um, and again, the pigments are different. Pigments are different from one, not consistent from one brand to the next. So what I'm saying is the reason why I mention that is because if you use the paints that I have here today, that's great. You can use them. You're going to get a good color. You're going to get a good color chart, but it's going to pertain to this brand of paint. It's not going to pertain to what you might have in your box. So if you use your box, then your color chart is going to be the better tool. It's always better to create a chart with the colors that you have and that you use rather than mine. But using mine is still better than any kind of printed chart or theoretical chart because it's still more in the realm of reality than that. Okay, so basically what we do so so what medium are you going to work with today? You brought your watercolors. Okay. And I didn't bring I used oils. How can you use them? All right. For now, what I'll do is I'll just give you that, and then what I'll give you too, so that when you can do this with your oils, okay, is this is actually a sheet canvas that I put through my printer. That's what I do. And this you can use to put your oils on. So we can get a little bit of practice on the index. And what would you like to use? That's okay. So let's use this. Use this for practice in here just with the acrylics. And then we can use this canvas. So I'll get you guys started on the color mixing. A little bit of practice. And then if you like, you can start us at home. What do you okay, so I'll give you something here. We will use the index and try out. Because I find a lot of times when we're starting to read, it's a little bit confusing. You're making a mistake anyway. So this way you can get you don't even receive that. And then, put this part on your stuff. So you're gonna stick with your watercolor, John? Yeah, everybody wants to everybody have. So does everybody have an index sheet and a okay. So you put this through the regular printer? Yes. It's actual sheet canvas that they sell for inkjet printers. And I love it because I can print out. I mean, of course, there's other, I mean, you could probably print a picture on this too and hang on the wall if you wanted to. Especially on canvas or if you don't think on your work. I mean, like, there might be a ton of different things I don't know if you use it for, but primarily I've been using it for this class so that we can have, I wasn't pretty up, I have like later on, like when we do like a color study, I have another format that I put on here that has clear and some other, these things for, mixing those colors. So it's great, because if you're using, your acrylic paint or your oil paint, you have this template, that around use and reuse for other means. So I also provide the download so that you can print this out whenever you want to. If you use it again with Create or other we're good here. All right. Okay. Figure this out. I'm gonna get started. I'll get set up. And basically what we're using today is we're only going to be using let's get this. Index because demo. All right. Okay. So anyway, you squeeze out the two colors on the palette. We're just going to use one of these palettes. I have a ton of them over there. And just a palette knife. And we're just going to use the palette knife to mix the colors and place it right on there and then wipe it off in between. There's not going to be, unless you're using watercolors, of course, then you can't do that. Then you're going to be using a brush, okay, and water. But when you're doing like oils and acrylics, trust me, you don't want to be doing this with a brush and having to swish a brush in between. It's just so much. You just wipe the palette knife clean and you can get this done lickety split. You don't want to be, oils is even harder. But to do this with a brush, totally not practical. Yeah, you'll be here for days if you have to keep cleaning that brush in between. So we're not going to do that. But anyway, use the palette knife to place the swatches of colors from the tube in the first row in the first column on the color chart. Okay, so basically what I do first is this right up. There's names of pigments. Now this can change. You can change this. You know, this is just what I would be using. The colors that I presented to you here are the colors that I would be using. And you would put them, just swatches of the pure color on the top row right under the name, and in the column right next to the name here, so that you have those for reference. And then I describe it like times tables, okay? Each of these blocks is a combination of the color that's either above or to the side, okay? So for this, in this example, okay, for this green, I'm mixing the cerulean blue with this cadmium yellow, and that's there. And the same thing for all of these. You're mixing the top row with the color from the column. And it's a two-color chart. You're just mixing two colors and going along and along. Okay. But I'll demonstrate that. Each color swatch in the body of the chart, triangle-shaped group of swatches, which is here, okay, is created by mixing one row color with one column color. One row column, one row color, one column color, and that's the resulting color. Okay, mix cerulean blue with cadmium yellow to create the green swatch. So simply wipe the palette knife clean with a paper towel in between the mixes, and then you just go to the following link to view the video on how to create the two-color mixing chart similar to the one pictured left. So I already had a video. I already did a video on this. So there's a link in the presentation to that video. But I'm going to show you anyway how I set it up. Now, here, the picture that I gave you is one that's completed. It's a picture of the original two-color acrylic chart, color mixing chart that I created. So it's hand-drawn and hand-labeled, so it looks really sloppy. So that was the precursor to this. That was the baby that brought this to life here. So then I created a final version. So again, I've created a whole bunch of other templates that are cleaner and neater. All right, and the next thing that we go, so we're going to get out of this because we're not doing a color study yet. We're not going there. We're going to start with creating our color mixing chart first. So let's get out of this. And I'm going to switch to my overhead. What's going on with my camera? My camera's touching. Touchy. There we go. Okay. No. All right. Great. Okay. So here we are. All right. So I have my palette paper back there. I have here. I have my color mixing chart right here. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to put colors. I'm going to put this a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm going to do the yellows first. Start with the what's the next one? Then there's the red light, which I don't have a lot of. Now, here, so I got these blues and reds. Not too much because, again, we're just mixing little blobs. You know, you can't really tell much. It's a slight difference between those two reds. But what you'll see through this, so this is going to take more than one piece of paper there. So I'm just going to start with the yellows and the reds. And the one thing I will say is, okay, just as a predictor, which yellow and which red should I mix to get the brightest orange? Which one should I pick? No. No, because cad yellow light reflects what? It reflects green. Which yellow reflects orange? Cadmium yellow. Cadmium yellow, like the cadmium yellow deep. Okay. This one reflects green. This one reflects orange. So if I mix either with the cad red light or the cadmium red, either of those two warms, I'm going to get a brighter, more brilliant orange. If I mix it with the red that reflects the violet, that's going to make a muddier orange. See, so this is the value in creating a chart, and this is the value of knowing which way your pigments lead, because if I see that daylily from my backyard, that's that brilliant orange in the springtime, I know that I'm not going to use alizarin crimson as my red, because that's going to give me a dull orange, no matter what yellow I mix it with. The dullest orange is going to be from the alizarin crimson that reflects the violet, and you'll see this for yourself, and the cadmium yellow light that reflects the green. That's going to be mud, because we got the red and the green. Red and green create mud, right? So if I think of this logically, knowing which way my pigments lean, I can almost predict this without even having to mix anything, and just know off the top of my head, okay, logically I know this reflects this color, that color reflects that color. That gives me some indication as to, even before I've mixed anything. If I think about that a little bit, I can take that the mistake and the error and the guesswork out of it. So that would be the first. Oh, I want to go back to this.
It's almost like I feel like I have to go home and take all my things and figure out where to make this right.
You can do, yes, and I invite you to do that with your own paints and take a picture of it. Take a picture of it like that so that you have it, because just like I've done here, that I think, I mean, you'll be able to see my picture, in the presentation when I'll send you guys the link to it so you can go back to it and see, what I showed you. but do it for yourself. You know, it's a great exercise to do because really, it really does help encode the understanding into your own memory when you do something like that and physically arrange it and look at it in relation to the color wheel and it'll stick with you better. So that type of repetition and exercise is so good. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a bit. Now, if you guys want to go along with me and, you know, okay. I have more tubes because we're going to run out of time. There's no way we could do this whole chart with the time remaining. That's why I referred you. Okay. Right here. And then you can complete that. Do it with your own and now in the next class, what color charts come out. There's your own. Different brand paper. For demonstration. So let's roll. Oh, I wanted to zoom in. Here we go. I'm going to zoom in because this is sometimes difficult to see. So let's get close and personal with this. Actually, I need to. There and there. Okay. So you definitely want to have lots of paper towels. Okay, so I'm going to start first by just putting the swatches of color across the top. So this is, I'm going to put it in the top row, and I'm also going to put it on this side. So I want the pure color so that I know what those two colors look like within that square there. Take that off. Do my cadmium yellow. So I'm just putting my pure color swatches along the top row in the column next to the name so that I have that visual reference. And basically, we're visually just, with the two-color mixing chart, we're visually just trying to get, you know, the midway in between the two. Most of us probably have colors, no matter what medium you have, but if you need to adjust them, adjust them. It doesn't matter what you label them. You can completely, you could reuse this for any colors that you want to play around with mixing. It doesn't matter. So we're seeing a lot of fall colors on our palettes today. We're starting with the reds and the oranges and the yellows, channeling our alizarin crimson. This goes so much faster with the palette. Now, I have to say, yes, this is very tedious, but, and yeah, it does take time, but I find that, well, you only have to do it once, really. If you're changing brands of paint, maybe you do it again, make some adjustments. And can you do another color chart where you do something? Yes, you can expand on it and do other versions. Yep. I don't I generally don't do like full blown like studies and really in depth thing. Any I generally don't do it because I just I probably have a more informal approach to it now because just have knowing kind of where I want to go. But I should bring in. I started doing one. Yeah, I started like a sketchbook, putting it in like I had a watercolor sketchbook, and I was putting in some color palettes that I was using in some of my paintings. I didn't want to forget them. Yeah. So things, color combinations, different color schemes that I was playing around with. Like they were like they started out like for example like um, I would pick like three colors that maybe that I was just feeling at the moment, and I was like, oh, I want to see the different combinations of colors I could get out of it. And I'd mix them, and then I would make some charts based on that, but in a different way. Now, when I make color charts, it's like I take whatever colors I'm using, I'll put them out on the palette, and then what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of each color and I'll put it in like what I call like a mud pile, and I'll take the mud and I'll add a little bit of each to each of the colors in another row because I want to see, okay, to make it more harmonious. And then I'll take each of the row, the pure color and the row with the mud, and I'll mix on either side. Mix it with black on one side and white on the other for each of them, so that I have this like it's almost like my own little candy store of colors that I know are going to be harmonious with each other, and then I'll just sit there and I'll play with them and see what what I want to create out of it. It's so much fun to do that. Like I could do that for hours. And it seems so unproductive and it's like completely, totally play, but I just get so immersed in that experience and it's just so much fun. I would never allow myself to do that before. It was always about, oh, I got to mix this color and it's got to go in that place. And I got to, it was always with some kind of an intent. I always had to have an intent, right? And it always had to result in, this, finished, painting, right? But I've been having so much more fun these days. You're being more intuitive about my choices with colors and adjusting values and playing around and just, really trying to channel, I would say, what my inner artist is and what I want to see and just seeing what comes out and not knowing what the end product is going to be. I just find that to be so exciting now. I, okay, so I have my colors pure colors laid out that were straight from the tube. So it's about 5, right? So now I know. So we skipped the first one because you're not going to mix the same color with itself. So I blanked that out. Okay, so that's why in the first square, I'm mixing cadmium yellow with cadmium yellow light. So I'm going to take a little bit of the cadmium yellow, because I don't want to contaminate my cadmium light. I'm going to take what looks like equal amounts, mix that together, right? And then I'm going to put it in that square right here, where those two colors intersect, where the row and the column intersect, right? And I know what the in-between yellow is. There are some times when I want the yellow that's a little bit, in this case, it'll be more neutral. It'll be in between warm and cool, right? So that's kind of cool that I know I have that option when I need it. And then the next one, with the cad red light, I'm going to be mixing it with the cad yellow light, and then beneath it, cad yellow light here and cadmium yellow below it. And let's compare the different oranges that I get out of that. That'll be fun. It should be fun, right? So I'll take some of my cad yellow light right there. And I'm going to take a little, I'm just going to take a little bit of that cad red light because I know that that has a really high tinting strength. It takes only a tiny bit to change that more transparent yellow. So there, so that's what I did there. Pick that up, put that here, and that looks like an okay orange, but let's see what I get when I mix the warm orange, the warm yellow with that red. So now I'm going to mix the red that reflects orange with the yellow that reflects orange, and let's compare those two oranges. It's going to be a real subtle difference, but in a larger square or a larger space, that can make all the difference. You don't know. A little bit of that. Oh yeah, that's definitely a more intense orange. It's definitely less orange. Absolutely see that. So that's good. I'll take that, put that in this square. Oh yeah. I would say that the muddier orange is more like a pumpkin orange, right? You can kind of look at it like that. Oh wow, look at that. I definitely see the difference between these two. Now, you might not be able to see it. Zoom in on that a bit. But you can absolutely see the difference in the oranges. Now, cadmium red is still, it's still a warm red, but it's darker in value. And it might have a little less orange in it. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to take a little bit of that yellow, cad yellow light, and take a little bit of the cadmium red because that's so dark. Mix that with that yellow. Let's see what happens. So again, a bit muddy. A little bit more red in there. I would say that's even muddier than the one before. So let's see what happens when we mix it with yellow. So I know you guys are probably busy, really busy at home. If you start this up with your own paints, and you get it finished, by the next gift that we're refill for our next calendar. Just burn the paints that you're using. And I have, oh, so now we have cadmium red with cadmium red light. There's not going to be much of a difference there. That does give a neat red though. I like that. That's a pretty intense red. Having it in between. That's perfect. I like it. That's getting a lot more interesting with these yellows and reds. Okay. So, all right. So we got cad yellow light, alizarin crimson. And one muddy, the muddiest orange you ever saw is happening right now. Look at that. Muddy, muddy, muddy. Now I have to put a little bit more red in there. That looks a little bit dull, but let's see. Let's put a little bit more red in there and see what we get. Yeah, look at how dull that is. Wow. Oh yeah. This is like pumpkin spice right here. Spicy pumpkin. Yeah, here we go. But you know what? I can see this or something though too. I think of it. I think that this color, some of these duller colors have a lot of application because if you look in nature, a lot of colors are grayed out. Right? A lot of natural colors are grayed out. A lot of our skin tones are. This could actually be part of a skin tone, I think. Okay, so alizarin crimson with cadmium yellow. So let's go for that. Mm. Orange. Ooh, you know what? This right here looks like a fall leaf. This looks like fall foliage right here. That duller, deeper orange that you might see. Alizarin crimson and cadmium yellow together makes a beautiful fall orange. Orange. And we have the alizarin crimson with the cadmiums. That looks pretty cool. Mixing the deeper alizarin crimson with the lighter reds. I like that. Yeah, I need a little bit more. That a little bit more. I really do like that. And then the alizarin crimson with the red, it looks like it's like cranberry. Oh, I like that. Yeah. Of course, you know, there's variations in color. Like you can take this two color and then take any of those two colors and put one on opposite and do a range between the cad yellow light with the alizarin crimson. Like there could be a range from this to that. This falls in, but there's other ranges too. But this at least gives you a hint as to at least what family of color you're looking at, and can give us more ideas about how we can uh, expand our options. And just know what we can potentially where we can potentially go with our color mixing rather than completely going into it blindly. So that's the purpose of it. This, of course, again, it's only meant to get you in the ballpark of a place where you think you want to be. And I can say, oh well, I love that orange. I want to use that in this painting of fall leaves that I'm doing. How did I mix that? I know that I use cadmium yellow and alizarin crimson. I could say to myself, well, maybe I want it to be a little bit more. Want to add a little bit more yellow to it, lighten the value a little bit. Maybe I wanted to punch it up and have it be a little more red. Then I'll put the alizarin crimson in it. But at least I kind of know where, at least approximately where I am. So yeah, so I encourage you to, with your own paints, uh, go through and let's I'm gonna have to zoom in on this. Probably be better because this is blurry. Oh, here we go. That's a little bit better. Let me see something here. Bring the camera down instead, because I think that'll be better quality. When you use the artificial zoom, it just doesn't quite do it. Take that down. Take that down. Bring this down. Oh, it's going to go black. Of course it does. Oh, there it is. It's back. Okay. Maybe that's clearer. Okay, yeah. So now we get to see the different shades a little bit. It doesn't do it justice though. I'll have to pass it around. But anyway, here we go. This is an excellent cooler colors. This was to use mine exactly what you think you want to use. But again, like I said, the value of doing this is in using your own paint so that when you sit down, you have a chart that's most useful for you. So thanks again. We'll see you next time. I'm sorry, what?
When we do our own charts at home.
Yeah.
Work with these colors.
You can complete the whole chart. You can go through. This was just to get you started on how to do the chart. But if you want to go beyond those colors and start adding in the other ones, go for it.
But I mean, use the cerulean blue, the cobalt blue.
Yeah.
As you have it listed.
Right. Or you can change it. If you want to modify this chart, you can change it to what you have. Actually, what I could do is I could give you a blank one. So that it'd be easier for you to change the colors. But I find that these are good colors to start with. It's a good basic set of colors that you can pretty much mix almost anything that you need with them, with the exception of a few extras. So that's it for today.